All right, welcome to the United States Lifesaving Service Heritage Association 2020 Annual Membership Meeting and Conference. My name is Mallory Bauer, and I'm with the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, and I am serving as your host this afternoon. So welcome, and thank you for being here with us. A brief introduction to Zoom. If this is your first time utilizing the software, we are asking all questions to go into the Q&A box, which will be in your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see a toolbar, wiggle your mouse and it should pop up from the bottom. And the Q&A is two little chat blurbs next to each other like this, and you'll click that and type in your question. We will have 3 different presentations this afternoon. As you think of a question, please put that in the Q&A box. We will be saving questions until the end, but we encourage questions to come in as you think of them so you don't forget. If you have any questions, please, or you're having any technical difficulties, please put those into the chat and I will be there to assist as best as I can. Without further ado, thank you for joining us again and enjoy the session.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Marthouse, and I'm the current president of the board of directors of the Lifesaving Service Heritage Association. Today, frankly, I want to extend some special thanks to the folks from the Michigan Historic Preservation Network. One that are assisting us with this. As you can imagine, this is a first go round for us. COVID-19 has made a lot of people and a lot of organizations have to do things in a little different mode. This is giving us a chance to meet our requirements, and at the same time allows us to bring a number of other interested parties in and learning a little bit about our organization. I also want to just take a minute and thank the folks from the Heritage Association and in trying to do some of this, give you a little bit more of an idea. If you have not been able to take advantage of one of our annual conferences and presentations, you get a slight taste of what we go through. So today, basically, the goals that we've established is, number one, is we've got to complete our annual membership meeting requirement based on our standing rules. Again, provide members with just a taste, really, of what an annual conference presentation, as well as tours that we normally go through, just really what takes place when we have those events. We're also taking advantage of this as a learning experience for the board as to whether or not we want to continue doing some of these, maybe a little more frequently, perhaps having some of our members cover a subject on down the road. So this is a learning curve for all of us. And the last item of what I'd like to make sure everybody walks away with is an understanding. If you're not a member of the Heritage Association, you have an idea of who we are, what we really do, and when we were founded. So to give you a little bit of history on this, the Heritage Association was founded on September 15th of 1995 on the Cape Cod seashore. And as you look at this and you look at 1995, this is our 25th anniversary. This event actually was an offshoot. Some people from the National Park Service that were put on this symposium to explain well, let me get into the National Maritime Initiative as it was relating to life-saving stations. If you noticed on the previous slide, Candace Clifford and Kevin Foster from the National Park Service were heavily involved with getting the word out from DC on this, exercise, if you will, on expanding and explaining and developing the maritime initiative. Candace was very strong in all of the areas. A lot of the folks that are interested in lighthouses, that her name will pop up real quick like. But what she realized is that there really was no attention being paid to the life-saving stations. And so she sort of formulated this group, a couple of the folks from a couple of the museums there on the Cape, in order to explain, you know, how this life-saving service should be incorporated into that initiative. So the discussion that was going to be given and was focused on was how to go about National Historic Landmark and Registry of Historic Places. Obviously looking at the buildings, looking at the potential of developing and utilizing those. There was already an inventory planned of the lighthouses, and so there was discussion at that event really of the potential of getting a registry or a listing of existing life-saving stations, and then on down the road a ways, developing a database of surviving small craft, as well as other property, equipment, and historic photographs of the station. So that's really what drove these people together. This is just at one of the stations. This, I believe, was Old Harbor that had been moved up to Providencetown. This was some of the folks that were there. Some familiar faces. There's one for Fred, a little younger there, Fred. But folks that are heavily involved in the founding of the Life-Saving Service Heritage Association. Dennis Noble is next to Fred, then Richard or Dick Bonasar, who ended up becoming the first president. Ralph Shanks and Wick York is sort of, I think you can see him, he's sort of hidden behind my face on my screen. But these were the people that were there, and I thought it was important to show just what this clustering was of the experts. So without going into reading each individual's name, you can see the cadre of folks from the National Park Service, historians and authors, a list of those people that were invited to attend. From the Coast Guard at the time, Bob Browning was the Coast Guard historian. Cindy Herrick was the curator of the museum at the Academy. David Reese, I don't know offhand, but some museum directors should also be familiar to some of the folks here. So that's who was brought together. And from that gathering over a 3 or 4 day period, they did some tours of a couple of museums just so people that were coming from other parts of the country could see what was possible to do and sort of give a flavor. So from that meeting, there was the players all put together that's where the organization was actually founded during that event. So that's where it started. As to who we are, we're the only national organization that is really focused on the life-saving service and the early years, really, up through World War II of the United States Coast Guard. We are a national nonprofit, basically focusing on preserving the fast vanishing life-saving stations, an early Coast Guard lifeboat station. And our goal, and the goal today is still the same, is to preserve the history, the station buildings, the boats and equipment of the life-saving service and the Coast Guard, so that future generations would be able to actually see these facilities and learn in much greater detail that significant part of our maritime history. So in trying to give you a little bit of a taste of the presentations, we've got 3 today. Fred, one of the founding members, is going to give a little Life-Saving Service 101 for some people that may not be familiar with the life-saving service. And then Sam Reed is going to give you a virtual tour of a station that is really coming to life on an island off Kittery, Maine. And then Bruce Lynn is going to put on a neat presentation on the efforts going on to preserve the Vermilion Life-Saving Station in Michigan. So again, following what Mallory said, any questions that you come up with during these presentations, please put them into that chat box, and we will address the authors or the presenters will address those questions at the end of the 3 presentations. Following those presentations, I will be back to conduct the annual meeting.
All right, and we'll let Fred get his presentation started. Thanks so much for that introduction, Steve. We've had some people asking how many people are in attendance, and we currently have 105 attendees, so welcome all. We're really excited to have you here.
Well, if we're ready, let's get Life-Saving 101. Another way of looking at it is watching or seeing life-saving as a historical topic from about 30,000 feet. But please remember that each slide that I'll be using, you can build an entire program around. So we are getting a very shallow treatment of it, but I think enough that this, as the other presenters go on, they've got some bases to build against and to play against, so they don't need to repeat the data. However, off we go. 150 years ago, there were no planes, trains, and automobiles. There was no airplanes. Any transportation that occurred was occurring by sea. And shipwrecks were as common as automobile wrecks are today. We've got about 7,500, for example, in the Great Lakes, another 12,000 if we include the St. Lawrence Seaway. If we get into the East Coast of the United States, you literally have thousands of shipwrecks. They can document over 550, for example, on the coast of New Jersey. So all of these were certainly a matter of great concern to the Due Nation. However, the beginning of the life-saving service in terms of an organized group really draws its roots almost back to the Mass Humane Society, which in 1786 now is beginning, or rather was formed in Boston. Now, pay attention to the word humane, because it doesn't include anything with farm animals, shepherds, collies, dogs, parakeets, and the like. It is strictly human life that they were concerned with. And they were concerned with the sailors that were dying in shipwrecks off America's shores. By 1807, they were already erecting huts to shelter victims of shipwreck because, again, we have to roll back our perceptions. 150 years ago when this was occurring, 200 years ago now, when you went to the beach, you didn't see endless rows of cheap condominiums, of boardwalks, of honky-tonk, of vacation homes. It was a desolate place that nobody wanted to live. Nobody wanted to live there because nobody was there. It was a wild place to be. So if you wandered ashore from a shipwreck, you likely, especially in the fall of the year, would die because you had nowhere to get shelter, nowhere to get food, nowhere to get dry clothing. So building these little shelter huts were incredibly important for the society to do. Later, they would go out and build complete life-saving stations with complete trained life-saving crews on station. Let's roll the history a little bit further forward now. It's about 1840, 1850. What's happening in America? We are getting a tremendous wave of immigration coming in from Europe. We're getting the Irish, we're getting the Germans, we're getting more Brits. They're heading for 3 different American ports: Boston, Philadelphia, or New York City, the great immigration centers of this nation. However, if that ship that they're on, that immigrant ship, is caught offshore by a nor'easter, they can end up on the outer banks, for example, of New Jersey, on the offshore sandbanks. That vessel in turn can break up, be lost, and you might have as many as between 250 and 300 people. In the case of the Powhatan in 1854, lost, drowned, because they could not make it 400 yards from where the ship hit to the beach. So this becomes more of a driver to get some sort of aid to these people. A New Jersey congressman by the name of William Newell, who was at his home district at the time, would bear witness to one of these horrific shipwrecks in his district, which would cause him to go back to Congress and obtain a grant of $10,000 to begin to equip volunteer stations along the New Jersey and New York coast. Massachusetts was already taken care of by Mass Humane Society. Problem with these early stations: there was no centralized inspection program, no centralized management. In fact, the management was pretty poor completely with them, because the crews were all volunteers. Some were trained, some were not, some were experienced, some were not. The keeper, the man whose job it was to maintain the equipment and call the crew to duty when a shipwreck came, was all politics. He was a political appointee. If he was second cousin to the local congressman, he'd get the job. Qualifications notwithstanding, the same way we appointed lighthouse keepers back then. It strictly was politics, and that was paying a fearful price along these coastlines when the ships occurred. Finally, the government would be pushed into action, and it took cartoons like this particular one drawn by Thomas Nast. And Nast was a very famous American cartoonist, and a very pointed one with his political cartoons. In this instance, he's showing Uncle Sam representing the United States, shipwreck victims in the wash of the wave and the wreck offshore, with the caption, "I suppose I must spend a little on life-saving service, lifeboat stations, lifeboats, surfboats, etc., but it is too bad to be obligated to waste so much money." But again, the public outcry. And for anybody that's a linguist, there was one very famous word in the English language that came from Thomas Nast. Anybody hear the word nasty? That literally was a takeoff from what Thomas Nast was doing. So by 1871, Congress would finally provide $200,000 to provide crews of experienced surfmen under the auspices of the Secretary of the Treasury. And this then becomes the true start of the life-saving service. Every once in a while in American history, it doesn't happen much and it doesn't happen often, you have precisely the right person in the right job at the right time. And that's what happened when Sumner Increase Kimball, who had been the chief clerk of the Treasury Department, was appointed to be the general superintendent of the life-saving service. He's 44 years old. He would keep that, he would keep that job 44 years until he finally retired at age 81 in 1915. Magnificent leader. He set the bar high. If you didn't meet his quality standards, you were gone. There were cases where he dismissed entire life-saving crews, including the keeper, because he felt that in extremis, in the midst of a shipwreck, they did not do all they could have done to have saved the lives of the crew aboard. So they were gone and forbidden from ever being employed in the life-saving service again. One more thing about Kimball. He was a graduate of Bowdoin College, Maine. There was another very famous Mainer, also a graduate of Bowdoin College, and any student of the Civil War would automatically pick up Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, the hero of Little Round Top on the second day of the battle, commanding officer 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry. There is nothing that says these men were friends. They were not, but they were in this class together, very small student enrollment. They certainly knew each other. And I've often wondered how much of one rubbed off on the other, because certainly they had qualities that were very, very similar. Well, Kimball would immediately reorganize the service into 12 districts. 3 of those would be on the Great Lakes. The rest would be either on the eastern seaboard or a couple of them that would be on the western seaboard, and would have great success. By so doing, you can see on the slide would indicate the number of people saved within a 5-year period. But look closely at that picture, because it shows a life-saving crew rather from Buffalo, New York, and they're wearing a uniform that they paid for themselves, because the service did not provide uniforms until 1881 and then made you buy them. The service gave you nothing. You had to buy it yourself. Well, here's a snapshot of where the stations were in New England about the height of the life-saving period. And you can see that Massachusetts, certainly with a large number of them, they were beginning to back off some of the early Mass Humane Society stations and replacing them with those of the US government. Look at New Jersey with 42. That gives you a pretty good snapshot of the number of wrecks that were occurring there and the need. Many small towns would go to Kimball with petitions to establish a station in their town, at their port, and he would turn them down because he didn't feel it was necessary. So he was very selective with where he put his stations and when. Height of the life-saving era, let's say 1881, 1885, there would be about 274 or so stations across the nation. 61 of them would be on the Great Lakes. This was the group that had the anecdotal motto. Regulations say we have to go out. They don't say anything about coming back. That was never official. That was never dictated. That was something the men came up with themselves. And they lived it. They lived up to that motto. And that's what makes that particular organization all the more remarkable. The equipment they used was highly specialized. They knew that lives depended on it, and they took great care in the maintenance of it and development of it. At one point, Scientific American had published an entire supplement on nothing but the equipment of the life-saving service because it was so cutting edge for the time, and some of the things they were trying and experimenting and working with. Three very traditional methods. One would be using the big lifeboat that would be launched at the station and would go by water to the wreck site. The second would be a smaller surf boat that would be taken by wagon to the wreck site, launched through the breakers. And finally, a breeches buoy apparatus that would be hauled to the wreck on a small cart. I'll talk about these. The lifeboat, derivative of the big English lifeboats from the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, self-bailing, self-righting. This particular model, about 34 feet, 4,000 pounds, oak frames, mahogany planking. What does that tell you? But that this boat was powerful. It was strong. It was not going to break up. It was going to make it wherever it was going. I know of no instance in the 44-year history of the service where a lifeboat, a true lifeboat, was ever sunk. Didn't happen. A couple were wrecked, a couple were destroyed by wind, striking rocks ashore, but never sinking. They were considered to be by their crews virtually unsinkable, and many of the crews looked on their lifeboat with almost a religious faith in it. The boat will bring us home. The boat can make it. There is no storm this boat cannot survive. And some of them were named Tempest, Excelsior, Success, Champion, because the men felt that strongly about their boats. The surf boats, by contrast, were uniquely an American invention. The general design was taken from the New Jersey skiffs that were launched out by coastal fishermen, about 26, 24 feet long, maybe 1,100 pounds, maybe even lighter, but very light construction, white cedar hull, oak framing, intended to be fast, very maneuverable, go out to a close-in wreck, make the rescue back through the breakers to safety on shore. It could carry perhaps up to 15 people. This is an interesting picture because it shows the lifesavers in the surf boat being launched. It also shows on the original copy of this that did not translate well for this slide, family members on the boat. Family members of the lifesavers. They're not making a rescue. They're taking their family members through the surf just for a little fun. But that shows the immense confidence they had in their own ability that they would risk their family members in such a manner. Supremely confident, supremely capable. Good example of the difference between the two boats. Big lifeboat on your left-hand side, smaller surf boat on the right-hand side. Finally, the breeches buoy drill, breeches buoy rescue. In that case, a small shot line would be fired from a small brass cannon known as a Lyle gun, range of about 400 yards. That projectile that would carry it weighed about 18 pounds, very light line behind it. That light line would foul in the rigging. The sailors who are already up to mast would use the light line to haul ashore a 1-inch whip line. That would be in turn made fast to the mast. The men ashore then, using the whip line, would be able to haul out a 2-inch hawser. On that, they would snap a breeches buoy. That's the device you see the man hanging from on the line. And then one by one, they could bring the man ashore. All of it made possible by the development of this little life-saving gun known as the Lyle gun, developed by Captain David Lyle of the United States Army. immense public respect, known as heroes of the surf, storm warriors, never showed the white feather, in other words, never quit. And again, I mentioned that Kimball would take strong action had they done so. But here's a shot, here's an illustration from, I believe it is Wesley's magazine rather, showing a life-saving crew towing a surf boat, getting ready for a launching. But look how the men are pictured, strong, virile, vibrant, powerful. And that's the image that the service had, and that's the image that the press would repeat. But the end for the life-saving service would come in 1915 when it and the Revenue Marine were combined into today's U.S. Coast Guard. So while it's the end of the era, it really was the beginning of the Coast Guard. That's where they picked up the coastal mission, and that mission certainly continues today. But during the interval, the 44 years, the life-saving service would rescue or assist 177,000 people. But Kimball, even when he testified to Congress, was very, very cautious with those numbers. And he always maintained that he would never say saved in any of his publications. Just because the ship is sinking, just because his crew is alongside and able to take everybody off it and bring them to safety on the beach, doesn't mean that he saved any of those people. Some of them could have made it ashore if they hung on to wreckage. Maybe that could have happened. So you never said saved. And I find it amusing that the Coast Guard about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago made a big tattoo that they had saved 1 million people in their existence. And of course, we recognize that as the PR spin that it is. But Kimball looked at the numbers very differently. Life-saving deaths, 140 lifesavers gave their lives in rescue attempt, accident, or illness following it up. No insurance, no death gratuity, nothing from the US government, not even a handshake. That was it. So if you were a family member, if this was your husband and you got a wife at home and 2 kids, and you're watching your husband go out through the surf on a rescue that he may not come back on, that's the situation these men were in. And I will submit that today they're in the dustbin of history. With the exception of what small groups like the Lifesaving Heritage Association is doing to promote the knowledge of this wonderful organization, they're often just forgotten about. We all know lighthouse keepers. We all go out and lug them and love the lighthouses and hug them and do all these wonderful things. But remember this, the lighthouse keeper had 2 jobs only. Turn the light on, turn the light off. Contrast that with all the jobs and responsibility carried by a life-saving station keeper and his crew. Well, thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I hope that provided some background of the old service.
Great.
Excellent, thanks. Sam, if you are ready to start your presentation, start your screen share.
You bet.
We appreciate your presentation, Fred.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great job, Fred. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Super. Hi, I'm Sam Reed, and I look forward to welcoming you here to the Wood Island Station in Kittery. I'm going to give you a presentation. I call it Past, Present, and Future, and we're going to do it all in about 30 minutes. So hang on. Don't go to the bathroom. Don't move. This is going to be quick and good. I'm standing on the south porch of the Lifesaving Station. You can see over my shoulder, there's whaleback light. I'll give you some more pictures of that in a moment. And I'm also going to finish this presentation and walk around the station a little bit with this computer. So we'll get a live look at her. Here we go. Let's get this going. Boom. As I say, I'm the board president here at the charity, the Wood Island Lifesaving Station Association in Kittery Point. Big fan of historic preservation and also a board member at the Lifesaving Station Heritage Association. There have been 3 different lifesaving stations here on the Piscataqua, but what we're really trying to convey, the one big message, is brave men rowing out in small boats to save others, as Fred has done a nice job of teeing up. The restoration of Wood Island is extraordinary. The fact that we're trying to open a maritime museum here, but the bigger message is the extraordinary men that did all of this. Here we have the Maine-New Hampshire border. Piscataqua River entrance. Literally, the town's name is Portsmouth. It is at the mouth of the port. And you all know the New England area, I'm sure, but imagine where the green meets the pink, right there. That is where I'm standing. And here's a little bit better map. This is Maine, this is New Hampshire. The state line runs right through. And there have been 3 stations here, Jerry's Point, Wood Island, and the current one at Fort Point. And you can see the dates. The better picture here is Jerry's Point is straight across the river from where I'm standing. I'm here at Wood Island, and the current Coast Guard station is at Fort Point. This is the first of the stations, Piscataqua River. It was a bib number 2. And I just realized last night, looking at Ralph Shanks and Wick York's book, which is fantastic, and I strongly recommend it to you. It was the first bib 2, so I'm really pleased about that. I did not know that. This was demolished in the 1940s as World War II was starting, but the U.S. Army kicked out the life-saving service in 1907 so they could build Wood Island. Here are some men from Jerry's Point on patrol. Fantastic old postcard. Here are the actual photograph of some of those men. Silas Harding is our big hero here. Sumner Kimnall, we take great pride in being that he is a Mainer, and his hometown was very close. Wood Island would be the closest station to his home. So he definitely knew this area extraordinarily well. But Silas was the first keeper at the first station in the Piscataqua and went on to become the superintendent of District 1. So really a big part. And here's Wood Island, the second station on the Piscataqua. This is the first photograph of her. And you can see the Marine Railway coming out. It is a true boathouse where not only are there boats living in the building, but they're also entering the water on a marine railway, which makes this a very special building. And this is the current Coast Guard station at Fort Point. You can see here is their actual station building, and here is their boathouse. So there's the building, and there's the boathouse. Look at that, wow. We believe there are only 9 stations still existing from the U.S. Life-Saving Service, so that is to say pre-1915 in Maine. And as Fred made point, there's 65 at least lighthouses in Maine. There's a little back and forth about exactly how many, but a lot of lighthouses and very few life-saving stations. Of the 9 stations, 3 are already on the National Register. Wood Island will be the 4th. It is currently eligible for the register. Only 1 of the 9 is open to the public. It's a bed and breakfast, and none in Maine are historically restored as museums. And this is a good point to make, that there's so very few of these life-saving station museums across the country. Great old postcard of Wood Island. That's a tremendous picture. And the building itself is interesting. This group will appreciate it and enjoy it. It is a Duluth-type life-saving station, first one in Minnesota. And as I say, brave men rowing out to save others. This one opened in 1908. It turned out to be the last Duluth type ever built. And that's assisting mariners in distress, extraordinary bravery. But the point to make is this is not a lighthouse. We hear that all the time. How's the restoration of the lighthouse going? It's not a lighthouse. If there's one thing I teach you, I beg of you, it's not a lighthouse. That is a lighthouse, and that is the lighthouse that's right over my shoulder, right there. It is right next to Wood Island. This was from a storm 2 years ago. This was from this week. So we just had a good rip coming through here. The hurricane, Teddy went by up to Nova Scotia and put in some pretty good waves. So this is right out the front door this week. And I mentioned this slide because you see right there, there's Whaleback, the lighthouse I just showed you. So there were many wrecks in the Piscataqua. The Piscataqua River was extremely active. Obviously, Portsmouth Harbor, a very large maritime port. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, an extraordinary place, the oldest operating shipyard for the U.S. Navy in the country. Incredible currently for its submarines, but it built many sailing ships. And I mentioned the Duluth type. Wood Island's a little weird because it is a modified Duluth type. You see, the normal Duluth types have a clipped gambrel roof. The end goes like that. Wood Island does not. There's a corbelled tower, meaning it has a little pagoda element to it. Wood Island does not. And all the other stations have 1 story over the boathouse. We have 2, which is fantastic. and we have 2 chimneys, everybody else has 1. So it's a modified one. The most significant difference to Wood Island and the other Duluth types, the front door, so to speak, where the boats came out on all the other Duluth types, is facing the ocean on the side of the tower. In Wood Island, the boathouse door, the boat room doors are on the other side because that's the protected side to launch boats. And I mentioned there are 28 Duluth types ever built. There are 12 remaining. I believe only 1 is historically restored in Old Harbor down in Provincetown, Mass. And Wood Island looks forward to being the second one that will be restored historically. Here's your vision. This is the big picture. You've got the Marine Railway in place, a pier in place, tourist boats arriving, a fabulous pole with a flag on it. Absolutely fantastic. The point to make here is we are restoring this life-saving station, but it is not just the restoration of the building. It's also the restoration of the seawalls, the pier, the Marine Railway. There's a lot to it. We think, we think it's a 6-phase project, and by phase I mean year, and you can read it for yourself as we've been going through how each year we've been working hard. We're hopeful in 2021 to be finishing up. It's really just a matter of money and time, but we're really doing well. That's what she started looking like at the beginning. Not so great. You know, the roof is collapsed. The poison ivy has taken over the building. That's the south seawall. It's already starting to crack and fail. No windows, no doors. So pretty dramatic situation. This is 4th of July, 2016. We've begun work. You can see that the roof is entirely removed, getting replaced. This is 4th of July, 2017. The building has new roof on it. It is not yet windows and doors, but it's all sealed up and nice and tight for the weather. There she is come 2017 fall. There are windows, doors, shingles, starting to look like something. Here's a historic shot. We have very few historic pictures. So if you have any, by any chance, please don't assume we have them. Please pass them along. This shows the Marine Railway coming down. 2 bays of the boathouse joining into one. That's pretty exciting and was high tech for the time. There's the north seawall. There's the little shed, looking pretty good. You all are familiar with the idea of a marine railway, I'm sure, but it is to say boats sitting on cradles, coming down train tracks to launch into the water. And that one was Dolliver's Neck in Gloucester, subsequently demolished. So we believe Wood Island, when restored, will be the only life-saving station in the US with a marine railway going directly into the building. There are certainly others that have marine railways that come into nearby boathouses, but we think this is the only one. And the reason I think that is because our good friends at the US Life-Saving Service Heritage Society has given us all of that data and information. Here's another one of our few photographs. That is really cool. There's some people rowing a little dory. This is a wonderful rescue boat, which was an old lobster boat. And you can see, looks a little chilly. Looks a little cold out there. So Wood Island was used for life-saving from 1908 to 1941. In World War II, the Navy came in and kicked out the Coast Guard and was part of the harbor defense for protecting from German Nazi U-boats. It was deactivated in 1948 and has been unused since that time. Kittery, Maine became the owner in 1973, and there was really very little or no maintenance done. So that's what it started when we kind of got involved with this. Seawalls are failing, lots of erosion, building looks terrible, a lot of weeds, kind of forlorn. That's what she looks like today. This was in August. So new seawall, place looks fabulous. There's before. That is toxic bird guano all over the floor, no windows, everything's falling apart. That's what it looks like right now. No sheetrock yet installed, but it's in the building ready to go. That's what it looked like before. Roof is not happy. Big holes, and no doors. That's what she looks like now. Second floor, collapsing. This is Aaron Sturgis, who I hope is on the phone call. A fantastic wooden building construction man, timber framer, just an outstanding historic preservationist, a fantastic crew he's put together. That's what that looks like now. And I think Dean Rikerson is also on this call. He's been our architect throughout and really has been fantastic. Here's the basement, and you know, Dante's Inferno has nothing on this. That is asbestos coming off all the pipes. That is asbestos all over the floor, lead paint, mold, really, really, really serious. That's what it looks like today. There's the boat room falling apart. There's weeds growing through it. And that's what it looks like today. The architect was George Tolman, and it was built by the Sugden brothers, Robert and John. And Tolman would have known this site because he was working at the Naval Shipyard here in Portsmouth. And he was the architect for the Lifesaving Service from 1892 to 1896. This is Robert Sugden's granddaughter, involved in our sort of ribbon cutting when we began the restoration in 2016. Her name is Barbara Haupt. And this standing next to her is David Kazalauskas, who's one of our Wood Island Lifesaving Station Association board members, the most senior lobsterman in Kittery. So just a wonderful event. Look at that, the granddaughter of the guy who built the building. And as I mentioned, we're a charity, a 501c3, and a little quick background of how we came to be. In 2009, Kittery began to plan for demolition of Wood Island. They owned it, they hadn't maintained it. It was very unclear what they were gonna do. They really threw up their hands and said, you know, it's time to get rid of it. It was certainly a very dangerous building. A group of residents began to ask a lot of questions about that. And so Kittery responded with a request for proposals in 2011, looking for help, looking for nonprofits to give it a hand. And believe me, it wasn't an easy process. This is a protest, believe it or not, we had out in the Kittery traffic circle. That's a woman from the Coast Guard. And you know, lots and lots of grassroots efforts to stop the demolition. Kittery eventually approved a contract with our charity. We were selected through that request for proposals, and we created a contract in October of 2013. The town said they'd go look for some money from EPA for brownfields funding to clean up the station. And our charity said, we'll do all the rest. But that contract said that we could only restore the exterior of the building, no use, no museum, no nothing, just go do the exterior. So we went ahead and we raised other money. So State of Maine, National Park Service, this group will know of the Maritime Heritage grants. We got a Maritime Heritage grant for $200,000, lots of private donations, foundation monies. We raised $750,000 and sort of came back to the table and worked with the town to create a new contract that allowed for the restoration of the entire station, to open it to the public as a museum, and that's a 40-year contract when we finish the restoration. So as I say, in 2016, we kicked off removing a lot of hazardous materials. We were so proud of ourselves. 100 tons of materials on and off an island. We were just amazed. That's how we did it. It was a naval rescue craft, a naval landing craft is what I'm trying to say. And it was using dumpsters and a dumpster truck. So really innovative stuff. There's a dumpster. There's the building all taken apart. And here it is starting to come back together. Really lovely, lovely pictures. That's just what's right over my shoulder right now. There's that lighthouse. So gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous new roof, a lot of new material coming in. In 2017, the exterior got finished. So new windows, doors, shingles, trim. It really looked great. In fact, it was truly better than new. And there she is getting done. Lots and lots and lots of labor to get that pretty. Here come the windows. Obviously, there's no other way but to carry them by hand. Don't want to break them. And here come the shingles. That's pretty fun. This is a neat shot. This is just the windows have been installed, no shingles. That's pretty cool. We think this project is a total of 4.5 million. We'll find out, but it's in that range. And in 2016, as I mentioned, $750,000. In 2017, about $500,000. And in 2018 is when things got really interesting. You can't see them because they're in cam mode. No, I'm only kidding. That is the Maine Army National Guard. And they were fantastic. The challenge for 2018 was to rebuild the north seawall. It was absolutely massive, 260 feet long, with precast concrete blocks, sort of like grown-up Legos. They all fit into each other. A lot of concrete, 21 concrete trucks, absolutely amazing project. We also rebuilt the historic shed and began the roughing out of the electrical and plumbing. And the Maine Army National Guard All the National Guards nationwide have something called Innovative Readiness Training. And I mentioned to this group, this national organization, in the hopes that others will follow along and in particular with historic restoration projects, work closely with your National Guards. They're looking for projects like this. This was a real test for them. They really enjoyed it. They sent 2 platoons, 60 men and women in each platoon. So 30 straight days, the entire month of June 2018. They lived in nearby tents. Their value, they believe, they donated $623,000 worth of labor. We brought in $400,000 in cash to buy the materials, permits, plans, all the engineering to help them. But this is what it looked like in the beginning of June 2018. No north seawall, gonzo. South seawall looks terrible. And it's time to rebuild. We're going to do just the north. Huge forms, massive, with concrete poured into them so the blocks can sit on something flat and level. Here come the blocks, enormous. Those are 3,200 pounds each, 1.5 tons each. And you can see from the drone shot here, big 5-sided wall, huge thing, as long as a football field. And this is how we did it. This is a landing craft from Casco Bay. It's called the Lionel Plant Senior. Coley Mulkern and is the owner of the ship, and he also designed her. Really special. It can take 2 concrete trucks at once. There you go. And those things drove right up the beach. They're all-wheel drive. They can come right up our beach. We did 20+ concrete trucks in 2018 and again in 2019. So really extraordinary piece of equipment. Couldn't have done it without this boat. The Army brought all these 10-ton trucks, and that's how we moved all the blocks. So they would load up all of their trucks, and they were, as I say, doing training. So they had a lot of people who had never driven a truck in all-wheel drive conditions like this. So they really enjoyed it. It was super. There's a wall. It is massive, massive, 14 feet tall, something like that. Huge, huge wall. Those are 2 of the sergeants that were critical to the entire project. You know it's good when they bring out their battle flag right there. And this was the 136th engineering company, 136th Battalion Engineering Company, State of Maine National Guard, whose forefather was Chamberlain. When you made mention of Chamberlain, Fred, that made me think of it. So these are literally the descendants thereof. This is the beginning of June 2018. You can see this amazing amount of erosion. We brought in 50 or 60 truckloads of earth and rock just to fill that in. There it is and underway. Scary. That's a very scary picture, but that's a nice one. And that's quite lovely. You see how there's a hole. Where's my mouse? There's a hole right in the middle of the wall out of wood, and that's to allow the Marine Railway, when it's built, to come right on through there. Here we go. I mentioned the Marine Railway in the boat. As you know, that's what we're looking for. This is a surf boat, as Fred was describing. And this, believe it or not, is the original plan for the Marine Railway at Wood Island that we found in the Coast Guard archives in Providence, Rhode Island. It is absolutely cool. This is exactly what we're building. This is what we permitted. And here's the plan from a B.B. McClellan motorized surf boat. No surprise, Tim Dring of this board has provided us the original plans. One of these boats was delivered to Wood Island in 1914, and it is our goal to build a replica of this boat that is able to operate in the water and use the Marine Railway. So that would be really special because to have an operational rescue boat is unheard of. So that would be really neat. Here's some pictures of B.B. McClellan motorized surf boats. So this is a rowing boat that had an engine in it. This one's in Chickamauga, North Carolina, and thank you all for hosting. Our wooden boat builder, Nate Piper, came down last year to take these pictures and get ready to build this thing. What we like to say is it's the first Coast Guard boat with an engine. So there's the inboard right there. There's some oars. And this is to give you the big picture. Marine Railway, pier. If you don't know, on our webpage, we have an absolutely mind-boggling, fully interactive, artificial intelligence. You can go in, out, up, down, all around and look at what it's going to be like. Really cool. That is a picture of a surf boat sitting on a cradle with steel wheels on train tracks. which is exactly what we're going to have. So in 2019, the Guard came back. They built the south seawall, very similar value. They also built the rec pole, put in the generator, solar panels, got the electrical working. Those are some National Guard folks. There's the south seawall looking a little rugged. This is just, you can see the north wall is in place. South wall hasn't started yet. Here they come. They start building another massive form. They start putting in the massive blocks. Really incredible stuff. I love this picture. Hang on, go back. That was a plumber, and the plumber looks so skeptical looking at the generator just arriving. I love that. Whoopsie, hang on, slow it down. That is the rec pole being put in place. So as we've mentioned, I'll give you more detail, but we have now this spectacular steel pole. There it is. This is a hell of a day. You've got 1, 2, 3 concrete trucks on this little teeny island. There's the landing craft. There's the rec pole. North wall is complete. South wall is complete. That was June 21st, 2019. And we mentioned earlier, Fred talked about the Lao gun. This is an example where you've got a rescue going on where the gun has been shot. And here it is, person coming off a wreck. And there it is, a person coming off a wreck. But to practice, and that's Chickamaucomico as well. There's our pole. And it's a really extraordinary thing. The idea of shooting your pole means, they're practicing taking the cannon out, shooting a projectile at it, and learning how quickly they can do that in emergency. There are very few places in the US that do that. We look forward to being one of them. So the Maritime Museum, educating the public all about the US Lifesaving Service, will be available for events, will also be available for overnights, as we'll have a docents program, and we've been collecting artifacts. We could really use help with that. And the most extraordinary thing happened last summer. There was an article from the paper 1920 that talked about a drowning of some of the life-saving men here in this area. And a new article was written about it. It was quite extraordinary. One of the men that died was the son-in-law of the keeper of Wood Island Station. And so the article was written about that tragedy, and this man got in touch that day. He is the great-grandson of the keeper, the grandson of the man that died, and his name is John Connors. He actually dropped by today. But he and his family have been collecting materials about their great-grandfather for literally 100 years, since 1920. So those are pictures of his great-grandfather named Charles Hand. He has Charles Hand's birth certificate, Charles Hand's appointment when he became keeper at Wood Island in November 20th of 1918. I mean, these are original documents, absolutely incredible. There's a picture of Captain Hand as he was, after he retired. And the jackpot of all jackpots, there was a picture of the B.B. McClellan at Wood Island in 1920. So obviously the only picture we have of that boat. And in 2020, we've also been busy. We've been building the pier and the Marine Railway. We hope that the superstructure will soon be done, and I mean like in the next 2 weeks. We hope to complete the pier and the railway in 2021. And if all goes well and we can raise the necessary monies, we think the interiors of the station could also be finished next summer. So this is about 2 weeks ago. There's the pier going in. Really something. This was this past week. And extraordinary. So the pier is really about to happen. So much history in this one building. Life-saving service, Coast Guard, Navy. Can we pull off this Maritime Museum shortly? We all know this man, this is Tim Dring, and he has been so helpful. Here he is, a member of this organization's board, and has helped Wood Island a lot. A list of the original boats that were here was given by Tim. Also, he has done extraordinary work putting together a list of all the station crew members and surfmen. This just happens to be the first page of Jerry's Point, but it continues all the way through Wood Island. So be sure to thank Tim, boy, extraordinary. This is Penny Watson, also of this board, an architect who came up and in 2015 did a survey and inventory of all of the trim work and the historic fabric of the interior of the building to help us navigate the restoration. And everyone always asks the question, how do you get to Wood Island? There are tourist boats that are currently operating in Portsmouth, A couple of them have, tens of thousands of passengers a summer. So we really look forward to catering to those boats. The island is a park. There's no charge to access this island, but there will be a charge to come into the museum. And there's, many, many, many folks to thank. We'll just, be sure to thank the town of Kittery for believing in us and our board for never, ever saying never. So many people said this couldn't be done. It's certainly not done yet, but for the doubters, I love this slide. This is a win. Just love that. Just love that. So we think we've raised and spent about 3.7, a little bit more than that, $1 million. We think it's about a 4.2 million which means there's about 500,000 to go. So really coming down the backside. Another chunk of money for the rescue craft gets you to about 4.5. Kittery has provided no funding whatsoever as per our agreement with them. And it has really been an extraordinary thing. I'm going to start to wrap up here, and I'm going to show you a couple of wonderful photographs because there are 1,000 pictures of this island. Just beautiful stuff. Sad. Better. We've had a wonderful partnership with Station Portsmouth Harbor. They've all come here every year to do some cleaning. That's an interior shot. That's the view from the tower, the lookout tower. Wonderful stuff. That's your friend Sam right there. Look, I'm wearing the same exact jacket. That's our banker. That's pretty funny. And just to wrap up, the station is a historically significant part of our heritage. We don't think there's any other life-saving station with a marine railway connected to the station, with an operational B.B. McClellan surf boat, and very, very few with a wreck pole. We are going to restore this station and open it to the public. And again, the big message of brave men rowing out to help others. This is good stuff. And we now have installed lights for nighttime, and it just is gorgeous. So the building is powered totally by solar. We have a diesel generator. We rarely use it, but we do have power at night, and the building looks amazing. We have lights for the flagpole so that we leave the flag up all night. That is good stuff. Great. Well, that's my presentation. I'm hitting it exactly at 30 minutes. And if we have interest, let's see, how do I get out of here? Stop sharing. Great. I'm going to just walk back for 1 minute. The sun is just starting to come out here on Wood Island. And I'll probably lose the internet connection, but that's okay. There's been a big fog bank all morning, lovely fog. And here she is. Look at this. There's the tower, the station. There's the wreck pole. Look at that. Wow. South seawall. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Please come visit Wood Island. It's so sad we did not get to host this event in person. Look forward to getting you all here soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. That's a beautiful morning that you get to experience. So I am pulling up Bruce's presentation, and then whenever you are ready, Bruce, we'll get started. Oh, this is what I wanted. There we go.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Mallory. Can everybody hear me okay? Or Mallory, can you pick me up? Is my audio okay?
Yes, see, I can hear you. So I hope everyone else can.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Vermilion Life-Saving Station and some of the historic preservation efforts that we're working on there at that location. I have to say, Sam, that was a really impressive presentation. I know we've got some SOS Vermilion members and board members that are watching this. As a matter of fact, Grace Truman, who I'm standing in for today, she wasn't able to do the presentation, but I'm sure she's watching it, and there's a lot of inspiration, I think, in what we just saw. But we are a 501c3, SOS Vermilion, and I'm going to be talking about one of the original 1876 life-saving stations that were on the south shore of Lake Superior. Mallory, let's hit the next slide here. Okay, so when I talk about life-saving stations or even light stations, and by the way, my name is Bruce Lynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum, and we're located at Whitefish Point, which if you would like Mallory to point out a little bit further west, actually, go a little north and a little west, yeah, there you go, right there. So that's where we're located. So you're going to hear me use Whitefish Point as a reference point quite a bit. It's the beginning of what has in later years come to be known as the Shipwreck Coast. So to put these life-saving stations and the light stations that were along this stretch of coastline of Lake Superior into context, it's important to understand really why they were there in the first place. And if you look at that stretch of coastline going from Whitefish Point and you kind of go west, what you're not going to notice are a lot of harbors. And a lot of ship traffic passing in that area. There's any number of reasons why ships would have gotten into trouble, anything from the weather, reduced visibility from fog, snowstorms, what have you. You can't rule out human error, to be sure. Collision was a big problem in these areas, especially in Whitefish Bay. But there were no natural harbors for these ships to get into. So to better understand why these 4 life-saving stations would have been built along this coastline, it helps to understand the number of shipwrecks in the area. And some statistics indicate as many as 200. You see other statistics that could say 300 and higher. So a lot of shipwrecks, we could just say, if anything, right in that area. One shipwreck that most people think about that would not have really benefited from the life-saving service. If any of you are familiar with the Edmund Fitzgerald that went down November 10th, 1975, 17 miles northwest of Whitefish Point. That is the one shipwreck that most people think about, but obviously this postdates the life-saving service, and it even postdates the life-saving or the lifeboat station by the Coast Guard that was at Whitefish Point from 1923 through the early 50s. But my point in showing this slide is you can see there's a stretch of shoreline there that really didn't have, and again, Mallory, if you could, yep, right in that area going west, no natural harbors, and that's where these 4 original stations were built. Let's hit the next slide here, Mallory. So for centuries, you had a lot of commercial traffic that was in this area, but it looked more like this. It was from the fur trade. So imagine 30-foot Montreal canoes full of fur bales, trade goods, that kind of thing, these hardy voyageurs. If the weather went south on them, well, hey, they could just pull that canoe, even though it was a massive canoe, they could pull it up on the shoreline. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. But as we get into the age of sail, the ships could not do this same thing. They had to be able to, if they were out there and the weather got nasty on them, they did have to try to work their way through that storm. Let's hit the next slide. By 1855, you have the opening of the navigational locks in Sault Ste. Marie, and really this opened almost, if I could use the analogy of an explosion of ship traffic coming up in Lake Superior. Many of these ships going out into the western parts of the lake, and you had copper, you had iron ore, you had settlers that were heading out into those western areas. But what it did was it created a dramatic increase in ship traffic. And of course, with an increase in ship traffic, you've got another corresponding element. It's going to be an increase in shipwrecks. Let's hit the next slide. So what did the government do to help all the shipping? This is Whitefish Point. This is the lighthouse that we take care of here at this location at Whitefish Point. The lighthouse that you see here is actually the second one built. The first one was built in the late 1840s. This one was built in 1861. The United States Civil War was just starting. This was an aid to navigation, to be sure. As Fred pointed out, it wasn't the duty of these lighthouse keepers to go out and rescue sailors off of ships that were getting into trouble. They did help if they could, and there's a lot of instances like that we talk about here at Whitefish Point. But again, they were not there specifically. They had to keep that light operating. So this was the starting point of the shipwreck coast. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. So we go to 1872, and I'm going to use this as an example. There were 2 purpose-built schooner barges, the Jupiter and the Saturn. They were being pulled by a steamer, the John A. Dix. They were leaving Marquette, so they were making their way east, headed to Whitefish Bay, headed to the Sioux Locks eventually in the lower lakes. They were carrying iron ore. I use these as an example. They predate the construction of these 4 stations that we will be talking about just by 4 years. And I believe that the sinking of both the Saturn and the Jupiter, the Saturn, and what ended up happening, and it was very common for these wooden steamships to be pulling schooner barges, and it was a more economical way to haul iron ore. But each one of the schooner barges would have had a crew, sometimes 5, sometimes 10. It just depended on the vessel itself. But they were making their way to Whitefish Point. The tow lines of these vessels broke. The Saturn ended up, or the Jupiter rather, about 12 miles west of Whitefish Point, and then about 3 miles west of Whitefish Point, the Saturn broke loose. And the reason I use this as an example is some crew members from these vessels did survive the wreck. They did get to shore, but eventually they ended up dying because there was nothing there. There's really nothing there now. If you want to find a very remote part of the United States that, although I'll say this summer seemingly is being discovered by a huge number of people, it's still very remote out there, and it was even more remote back then. So some of the crew survived from these shipwrecks, but they died of exposure. Let's hit the next one. So Mallory, yeah, there we go. So the answer to this, or what could have been an answer to help these ships that were traveling along the shoreline, were 4 life-saving stations to be constructed. They were constructed and operational by 1876. There were 4 of them. They became Lake Superior type stations. Originally, each one would have had a number. Vermilion is about 10 miles west of Whitefish Point. This is actually Deer Park, or what's also known as Muskellonge Lake, that area of the Upper Peninsula. This would be the westernmost of those 4 stations, and this gives you a very good idea of what they would have looked like. Mallory, let's hit the next one here. And here is a photograph you can see of that same station, Deer Park. This is 1911. This is just before the Coast Guard ended up taking over these stations. But if you look to the left, you'll see the station house. This was typical. This is what all these station houses look like for these 4. You can see the boathouse on the right there. You can see the crew. They've got what looks like a summer weight uniform and their surf boat you can see right there. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. Okay, there's Vermilion. So this is the station we're going to talk about. It really does not look like this at all today. It has suffered quite a bit. We have very, very harsh winters. If any of you have spent any time in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the winter, you know, we can have 2-3 feet of snow on the ground at any given time without drifting. Just very, very dramatic weather conditions up here, and very, very harsh on these historic structures. But this gives you a good view of what this Vermilion station. Note the red roof. Again, this is what appears to be a hand-tinted image that you can see right here. But this was very much a working station. Let's hit the next one, as all of these stations would have been. Here's a nice elevation that you can see. So this is the structure at Vermilion that we are looking to preserve. We have had a good amount of help from Lifesaving Service Heritage Association, and we are, on behalf of the Board of Directors for SOS Vermilion, we are very grateful for that. From the funding and underwriting of a historic American building survey to a startup grant in the amount of $3,100 to get us started. We're a very young organization. 2017 we were formed, and we can look at Wood Island and places like that as a great example of the kinds of directions that we'd like to go in order to preserve this station. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. Okay, now here's a very close-up view of a map. You can see Whitefish Bay. You can see where it says Whitefish Point Lighthouse. There's another, you know, there's a lot of different names. The graveyard of the Great Lakes. Of course, there's a lot of graveyards of the Great Lakes. I'm sure on the east and west coast, there are various areas where there's a higher concentration of shipwrecks. That's exactly what we have here. Looking at Whitefish Point and going west. You can see Vermilion Point Life-Saving Station very clearly there. As I stated before, it was incredibly remote then. It's incredibly remote now. There's a sandy road. You can see that indicated, Vermilion Road right there. There are a couple of colonies of beavers that often dam up areas, and the road suddenly becomes impassable. So it's just a very remote location. You can see Chris Point just to the left there too. There was a life-saving station there as well. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. Okay, now we're lucky. And hit it one more time, Mallory, too. So we do have good resources. The National Archives in Chicago have not only records and ledgers from the Coast Guard lifeboat stations that were up here in the Great Lakes, but they also have the life-saving stations that are covered. We have an excellent resource, unfortunately out of print book called Life on a Lonely Shore that helps us to better understand the history of that site. And some of this can help as a guidepost to better understanding that history of the specific site. And eventually, as we interpret that history, we're going to be using a lot of these sources that you see here. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. So, much as, and I won't go into great detail on the kind of daily life for these life-saving service surfmen, the lifesavers, the heroes of the surf, all these different names for them. But this was kind of a tough station, I think, in some ways for these crews to be stationed. There was nothing else there. There's nothing else there now. They didn't have any opportunities really for socializing, these crew members. If they were fortunate, they had a wife, maybe some their family with them, but there were no opportunities for them to go to a dance club or a nightclub or whatever. There was nothing like that was out there. If you think of some of the life-saving stations, it would have been maybe in some of the built-up areas. I think of the station that was in Marquette. I can think of Chicago on some of these Great Lakes stations where there was a community nearby. The morale of these crews inevitably, I think, would have been much better than what it would have been in a place like Vermilion. And of course, there weren't shipwrecks every day, but they did train every day. Except for Sunday. Sunday they had a little bit of time to kind of relax and maybe do some fishing or who knows, possibly hunting, what have you. There were some other things that maybe they could do. But it was a tough station, I think, for these crews to be located. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. So boat drills. So many of those things that Fred talked about, maybe some of the images that Sam showed too. These crews and these Lake Superior life-saving stations are doing the same thing. You can see that image right there at Vermilion. Let's hit the next one. This next one was taken probably in August. That's a joke, actually. If I had a crowd in front of me, I'd hope everybody would get it. We all like to talk about how dramatic the weather is up in the UP and how cold it could be and all the ice and how terrible it is. But no, this is the kind of training. This was after 1915 at Vermilion. This is after the Coast Guard took the station over. Look at the conditions that they're doing their boat drill. Hopefully that keeper, or at least the Coast Guard gentleman in charge there, would not have made them upset that surf boat and go through their boat drill at that point. I think that would have been pretty tough for them. But the conditions, and the reason I show this slide, could be very, very harsh up there. Let's hit the next one. So yes, Breeches buoy drill. So every day of the week, save Sunday, they would have had their drills. This would have made them proficient, of course. Also, it would have, I think, arguably kept their morale up. It would have kept them busy. They would be working, maybe a little less time to think about where they were and how there wasn't a lot of opportunities to connect with the outside world. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. Okay, so I want to shift gears for a moment. We could talk a lot about the work that they did, saving people on shipwrecks, putting their lives on the line, the drills that they did every day. But they had their families in a lot of cases. On the far right, second from the right, you can see Keeper Carpenter. This is a summer photograph of the station, the building that we are looking to preserve and protect. But you can see, look at the family, look at the dogs there. People are dressed up a little bit. You could look kind of a little bit inside of those windows. You could see the drapes that they have there. This was a small hub of a little community that was built around this station. So family life inevitably helped keep things going and helped to keep everybody sane, I think, at this remote station. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. So family life, Keeper McDonald's wife and Jenny Williamson. Look, you can see the dogs there. Note the snow in the background. Let's hit the next one here too. These are just a couple of images of showing, and the funny thing is it's showing a little bit more informal moments there. Look at the cat on Surfman Williamson's right shoulder there and his wife Jenny at their home. There are remnants still today at this very remote location on Lake Superior shoreline of some of these little homes, these little cabins that were built by these life-saving service crew members. So they would have that little bit of family life with them as they were at this very, very desolate location. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. And then here, look at the snow. So, you know, it's late September right now. It's not unheard of for us to have our first snows coming in October, early October sometimes. As far as I know, 3 weeks from now, we're going to be getting hit. And this hit them as well. And so that not only were they often battling the isolation, they were battling to save all these different crew members and assist them, as Fred pointed out, in the various shipwrecks. But the weather, the conditions were against them as well. Pretty tough place to be stationed. Let's hit the next one. And we're going to start moving forward a little bit. We're into the Coast Guard era. Sam had talked about a motor surf boat. You can see one on display on the right. This is, again, the Coast Guard now is in charge, and now it is a rescue station. You can see a variety of equipment. So they're still using a lot of the same equipment that they would have used in the 1870s, even though we're in World War I era at this point. The beach cart, the surf boat on the left, you see a variety of uniforms, and then again, that motor surf boat. So technology is increasing. We'll hit the next one. And then now we're starting to see a change. And in the late 1930s, you had a number of new structures that were being built as it was part of the Coast Guard. And let's hit the next one. Okay. Now, we've shifted gears completely, and a little bit of back history here. So 38, 39, leading right up to the point of World War II and the United States entry in that war, we had new buildings being constructed by the Coast Guard. But shortly after World War II, now suddenly these new buildings and parts of the original 1876 station are being declared redundant. And now there's only one keeper there, and they're relying on Whitefish Point, now the rescue station that was at Whitefish Point. This is just after World War II that this occurred. And if you take a look now, we've moved forward to the 1970s. You can see, if you look at the upper left-hand picture, look at how close the shoreline is. It's interesting because the lake levels now are bigger. Maybe folks on the East Coast, West Coast, maybe, well, I know you're having your problems out there too, but the lake levels have been going up every year. But it's interesting now, Vermilion, from those buildings, you have a little bit of a walk, 3 minutes or so, 4 minutes to get out to the shoreline, but the lake levels are even higher. So it shows the unpredictability of the shoreline and how things change. But you can look at the rough condition there in the 1970s, and by 1985, there is the Vermilion station. That is the structure on the right that we're looking to preserve. Very, very rough condition. And let's hit the next one. So what's going to happen here? We have various private owners through the years that have owned it. A university here in Sault Ste. Marie, at least Sault Ste. Marie, about an hour away from where we're located here at Whitefish Point. Lake Superior State University took over. But by 2007, the Little Traverse Conservancy, which is primarily more of a nature preservation group, more protecting nature and preserving nature for future generations, but less of the built environment. And let's hit the next one. But they were willing to reach out to us. And by 2017, we have a small group of people. There's always been an interest up here around the area of Paradise, Michigan, which is the closest very tiny community, Sault Ste. Marie, Eastern UP. People are aware of the Vermilion station, and people, you know, a lot of people like myself as a child would go out there and walk around on the beach. A beautiful location, and people have taken that to heart and have wanted to preserve this station, seeing the condition that it was getting in. So by 2017, SOS Vermilion is formed. Again, help from the United States Lifesaving Service Heritage Association to start up our preservation efforts, but also partnering with Little Traverse Conservancy, which has been a great partner to work with in order to preserve the station. We now have a lease with them on this structure and that little footprint of property that it's on. Let's hit the next one. And so this is what it looked like in 2017, and really starting to slump, in bad shape. I'll be honest with all of you, I'm actually surprised that it's lasted this long and it's still stood, again, considering the conditions that we have up here. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. And you can start to see the work now. So what we're looking to do is stabilize this. And you can see many of the members of the board of directors, and that's mostly the volunteers we typically have, our board of directors for SOS Vermilion. In the green shirt, you can see Grace, and going up the ladder in blue, Steve Truman, her husband, and a few other members of the board of directors there doing some work on the structure. Rick Newman there at the peak of that little building. But what we're doing is we're taking away some of the additions that are dragging down the structure. Let's hit the next one. Again, our goal is to save that that station as it originally was in 1876. You can see the roof, a little bit reminiscent of some of those images that Sam was showing there of Wood Island. Some of this sinking down into the sand, but we're making little efforts here and there. You can see, and as we were doing this, there were little telltale hints of what you could see some of the original color, which we wouldn't have seen before because all of that paint was gone. And other little telltale signs of that original station, the one section where the boat would have been kept, another section which would have been the housing for the crew itself. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. So getting that roof taken care of and venting the building were two of the primary and first projects that we were working on. Again, a very small group of us that were up there working on that building. You can see on the left picture in the green, Ken Chapsky, and again, Steve Truman there working there. So one step at a time and a very small effort, we're really just kind of starting to get traction. Let's hit the next one.
I apologize.
Is that a ship passing, Sam?
It's better than that. It's a lobsterman who I mentioned in my presentation as a board member of WILSA, and I'm guessing he knows we're live.
Well, wave to him for us. But some of my last couple slides I'm going to show here. So the last two winters we've had up here in the UP have been particularly harsh, very high winds. Some of the original architectural design work and the peak of the structure, which again, personally, I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. But if you take a look at that picture, March 2020, so very recent, you can see some of that original fretwork, if you want to call it that. Yep, half of it is gone. It had lasted the entire, all of these years since 1876, and now it finally fell off. Let's hit the next slide. And we'll see a few more images of it. We're starting to do a little more stabilization, but if you look at the peak, you can see that it's completely gone at that point. We saved the pieces. You can see some of the pieces at the base of the building. And then just to the right of the building, or as we look at the picture to the right, you can see part of a boathouse that would have been built in the late 1930s. So some of those buildings over the years have had a little bit more work done to them, while the poor old 1876 structures have just kind of been let go. Let's hit the next one. So that's this summer we're talking about. We've had rolled roofing put on. This is a temporary measure. We hired a local contractor. They were able to come in and they were wonderful to work with. A company by the name of Nomad Construction based out of Sault Ste. Marie. They brought their equipment in and very quickly got that rolled roofing on there. So these are just little steps that we're taking to save the structure and prevent further degradation of the structure itself. Let's hit the next one. So little other things that we've done. There is, as much as this is a remote location, it's hard for people to get out to it. With the advent of ATVs and side-by-sides, which are all over the trails. There's snowmobile trails all around this area, but now these ATVs are using these snowmobile trails. So we do see more traffic, except for when those beavers are cutting off our ability to get out to the station itself and flooding the roadways. But we've built interpretive signs that tell the history of the site. We just put those in. You can see volunteers on the left that are putting that signage in. So it gives those visitors, people that are hardy enough and have a four-wheel drive or an ATV that can actually get out there, to help them to better understand the history. And nearby, we've got a little donation pipe. And I have to admit, I've been very pleasantly surprised at the donations that we've been getting out there. We'll hit the next one. One last image I'm going to show you there. Look at the peak. So the roofing is on it. We've taken some steps. It's looking, you know, a little bit more. We're getting closer, but eventually and ultimately what we'd like to do is we are going to preserve that original station house, interpret that history, possibly a visitor center of sorts to help people and visitors to better understand the history of those four original stations, focusing on Vermilion. Let's hit the next one, Mallory. I think I'm just getting over my time a little bit, but that's the last slide. So if you would like to learn more about the Vermilion Lifesaving Station, you can visit our website at sosvermilion.org. We're a very small group right now. We're looking to grow. We're looking to grow our membership. And anybody who's interested in learning more about it, you can go to this website. And I'll just leave it at that and say thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak on this project, and thank everybody for tuning in to this. And thank you, Mallory, for doing such a great job of forwarding these slides.
You are welcome. It is my pleasure. So now we have a few minutes for Q&A. So it looks like I'll just read those out and anyone can answer. We'll try to get through as many as possible, but I think we want to start the member meeting in 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll spend a few minutes on this. So Sam, I think this one is for you. How well does the marine railway withstand larger storms, hurricanes, etc.?
Well, I think in the history of the existing station, so the 1908 to 1948 timeframe, we have all kinds of letters and correspondence where the building was fine, but the marine railway was damaged. So they were struggling with that for the entire time it was in place. We have not yet completed the construction of it, but we're building it to the exact same plans, but we're building it out of steel where much of the previous was wood. I didn't mention, but that we've had a donation of 21 segments, 40 feet long, of train track. So this is the body of the marine railway is the track itself, and the track that we've been donated is from 1896. So we've got the exact right width that was there, and we hope that train track will really help hold it together. So we haven't had experience with the marine railway getting hit by storms because it's not in place yet, but that we are definitely cautious about it and building that thing to take a real beating.
We did have several congratulations to both Sam and Bruce for your active work preserving these structures. Another question for Sam, was there any particular shipwreck prior to 1908 that was the pivotal factor in the decision to establish the Wood Island Station, or was it a series of disasters in the vicinity that ultimately convinced everyone that such a facility was needed at that location?
I mentioned, Fred mentioned that Sumner Kimball would get petitions from towns trying to establish life-saving stations. And one exact same thing happened here in the Piscataqua. A petition was created. There were a number of merchants that wrote that petition, and they came to Sumner Kimball and said, you know, we are anxious about our merchandise and our shipping coming through this dangerous river. So there were numerous wrecks, but I think it was really interesting that the petition process played out here to the good and became the Jerry's Point Station in 1888. The extraordinary thing is, in 1888, the very year that the first life-saving station opened, there was sort of the most famous wreck, and it was called the Oliver Dyer, and it was a coal schooner, so only 5 crewmen aboard, but it was washed ashore near Wood Island over in Newcastle, New Hampshire, and the Jerry's Point crew rallied and had a really tough time with it. It was too rough to launch a boat. It was so close to shore that there was really no point in a breeches buoy. They threw a monkey's fist, so just a line over, and entered the water themselves. So they got in the November 1888 weather and started pulling people out of that boat. The reason I mention it so well regarded, well known, it was the entire crew received a gold medal from Congress for that heroism. And I believe it's the only time an entire crew of a life-saving station ever received gold medals for a rescue. So I hope that answers.
Excellent, thank you. There was a question, and now of course I cannot find it, but Bruce might have be able to share a bit about it. Someone was saying they had read somewhere that stations were meant to be moved depending on the water level change, proximity to the beach. Do you have any information on how that might happen, if it did, or if it may have happened at the Vermilion Lighthouse or Life-Saving Station?
You know, there have been discussions in later years of moving it because of the threat. I am not aware of them being moved or built in such a way that they could be moved if the lake levels went up or down. You know, we're having similar problems here at Whitefish Point today, where a lot of our beach erosion and deck, we have an observation deck that's starting to disappear a little bit. But no, I'm not aware of them being built in such a way that they could just be picked up and moved, but that discussion has taken place in more recent years because this is the only remaining station of its kind to actually move it. There was an idea to move it to Crisp Point, which originally had one too. exactly the same type of station that actually was there before the lighthouse was built. But that was deemed to be really unrealistic for moving it. It was in such, and it is still in such rough condition to be able to do that. So that's a good question, but I'm not aware of them being built that way.
Okay.
If I can, Mallory, let me add a little bit to that. The stations that were built along the East Coast, especially those that are on the sandy beaches, most of them had been moved at one time or another, receding as those sandy beaches changed. So they were moved, and they were moved quite frequently, at least on the East Coast.
Thank you for adding that a bit of information. Sam and Bruce, both of you can share what maybe you have found. Were there any surprising artifacts that you have found while restoring these stations?
Bruce, you go first.
I was going to say the same thing. I think some of the architectural features that we've found while we've gotten into it, and some of us have been probably silly enough, if you want to put it that way, to go up onto the second floor of the building. There's really nothing left. And the unfortunate thing for us at Vermilion was that after the Coast Guard shut these buildings down, and really they became redundant property, there was a lot of vandalism. I think a lot of the items that were of value were taken. I'm sure that's happened to some of the other structures or even light stations. So that's true. But, you know, over the years, personally, I've found some interesting things out there just by walking around. Little items here or there, maybe that you might find near some of those cabins that the life-saving service crew members would have built. Finding some of the original shingles when we took off part of the structure was interesting, that were still visible, and finding those original colors of the building, which you wouldn't expect. And that the opening slide we had showed the original colors of the Vermilion station, which very vibrant. We've only ever seen it in our lifetime as this weather-beaten, no paint on it, poor old structure that looks like it's ready to collapse and has looked like that for decades. So, you know, nothing really dramatic as far as an artifact jumping out, but just some of those features, some of those architectural features that as you peel away, some of the additions to the building that started to show up. Sam, take it away.
Well, I think really very similar comments. The building was in horrendous condition. It had been vandalized. There was, you know, it's extraordinary that it wasn't burned to the ground, really. But we found a lot of small things, tools, and interestingly, we found a lot of pottery shards, including pieces of plates, even including the Coast Guard logo. So the actual plates that were here are rattling around, including as sea glass. So people know this, and they're constantly wandering around Wood Island looking for sea glass original pieces. You know, in short, there wasn't a whole lot here. We found a lot of interesting small things, including a glass jar that says U.S. Treasury on it that was used for a quill pen. So it was an inkwell, which is pretty slick. But we're gathering all these small pieces, and we'll put them in the museum as time goes on.
Perfect. At its height, so this is a general question, how many stations were there, and about how many total surfmen and keepers? Does anybody want to?
I'm going to defer to Fred on that one.
Oh, it's a Fred question.
And Fred, I think you are muted, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go.
Well, it looks like, okay, whatever it takes. The generally accepted figure is about 274 at the height of the service.
Life-saving stations.
Life-saving stations. Each station would have a keeper and up to 8 surfmen. Some only had 6. So you do the math on that, and you add the general, or not the general, you add the district superintendents, which were life-saving service employees, and you've got maybe 3 dozen of those. So that gives you pretty well an operating staff, less those in Washington. Now, the thing that makes that remarkable is that that was, I would argue, the most decentralized branch of the federal government. because it had this little life-saving station, 8 or 9 people here, and then 30 miles away, you may have another one, and you may have another one, you may have another one. But the wiredness together then was at best tenuous, much like lighthouses, but they were more organized than the life-saving stations were.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Kim Mann posted something in the questions that I'm going to share into the chat that has a little bit more information about the Sleeping Bear Point Station. So on Lake Michigan was moved when Sam began burying it. So if you would like more information, Kim, I hope you don't mind. I copied and pasted what you put into the Q&A to share in the chat with everybody. A question came in. I've read about junior surfmen and mascots as well. Is that consistent from station to station in terms of numbers?
Mascots were typical. One station along the shipwreck coast, I think it was Two Heart, they fired the keeper fired a surfman because he kicked the keeper's dog. So he was out of here. Well, they had a mascot there. But in 1900, 1910, 1915 era, you would find books out that were the Boy Scouts and the Life-Saving Station. It was the Boy Scouts of America were involved with life-saving stations. You would find other books about junior lifesavers. It was a whole venue of adventure stories for boys built around the life-saving service.
Dang. Were there any female surfmen?
No.
And then another follow-up question of, did women play a role in the life-saving stations? You know, we did see that wives would live in the life-saving stations occasionally.
Yes, they did, because each of the stations would have something they called the box of the Blue Anchor Society. And the Blue Anchor Society box was clothing that had been donated and would be distributed to shipwrecked sailors. And it usually was the responsibility of the keeper's wife to manage and to run the Blue Anchor box. But you have to put yourself in the situation. The crew's out on a rescue, they're 10 miles out, they maybe are coming back, they maybe don't. When they come back, who's the one that organizes the beach party? Who's the one that gets the fire going, the beach fires, the bonfires? Who's the one that's going to render the first aid, gets the blankets ready, get the food ready? All of that infrastructure support necessary for the shipwreck crew and their own men to be made whole again. And that would fall usually on the keeper's wife to organize, but the other wives that may be there to help that all work. So they were unpaid help in every way.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I think we should wrap up the presentation and the Q&A, but presenters, I always like to ask for a closing thought, something that a takeaway that you're hoping everyone leaves your presentation with. So Fred, since you went first, let's start with you, and then we'll go through and I'll turn it over to Steve. Steve, if you want to start queuing up your presentation for the virtual meeting, that would be wonderful.
All right.
I think I would just ask everybody to remember that they really are America's forgotten heroes, and really to remember what they did, how they did it, tremendous sacrifice that these men made, but particularly the danger that they willingly put themselves in to save other humans, save other life. That, I think, is the takeaway from the entire service and from what I tried to say. Thank you.
All right, Sam, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, my parting thought is it's humbling to be able to be involved in something like this, where these men were beyond brave. They were going out in rowing boats in storms to help others. So really an extraordinary opportunity to try to convey that to future generations, first responders in an extraordinary manner. And I hope you can see I'm standing in the tower of Wood Island Station and just panning around having fun. So thank you again for having us, and we look forward to welcoming you all to Wood Island in the years to come.
Thank you for sharing your view. And Bruce, any parting thoughts?
Sure, yeah. You know, just thanks again to everybody for attending and the invitation to, again, speak about Vermilion. You know, a lot of people don't know about this station. We're a pretty young nonprofit that's really just kind of getting underway with the idea. And kind of like Sam just said about Wood Island, I think all of us feel that are involved with Vermilion, we're humbled by the idea that we can be a part of preserving the last, really the last one of its kind, the last Lake Superior type station. So if you do, again, want to learn more about it, learn more about what we're doing or become a part of it, just take a look at that sosvermilion.org or contact any of us or contact me at the Shipwreck Museum if you have any other questions. We'd be happy to help. So I think that's it. And thanks again.
All right, Mallory, am I showing?
Yep, I see your presentation, so take the meeting away.
All right, I'm trying to get this to move to the next one. All right, so this is the agenda for the meeting. The first thing that we want to take care of is the election of the board members. Following that, I'm going to give a president's report. Then we'll go into the goals for 2021, and then we'll take some additional questions at the end of that. So for the board meeting elections, we're going to do this electronically. It's going to be done by polling. Mallory will be in control of that. That screen will pop up when we get there. And I ask really that only the members of the Lifesaving Service Heritage Association respond to that. You know, I'd like to have everybody, but in order to meet the requirements of our standing rules, it has to be from our membership. And in the event that there is not, or if it's questioned, the electronic election, whether or not it doesn't stand up to our current standing rules, we've modified those. But if there is a question that's raised, we would follow this on to our membership by means of a mail-in ballot later on, but we believe that this will suffice. So this is the slate that the board is recommending the individuals for a term of 3 years. And so at this time, I would like to reach out for a motion from the membership to approve this slate of candidates.
So moved.
All right.
Can we get your name and motion?
That was, or am I supposed to second? That was Sam Reed moving.
All right, Sam Reed has moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And that is?
Mike Carlson.
Okay, Mike. So we have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded to elect those identified individuals for a 3-year term on the board of directors. So Mallory, the polling.
All right. Please hit
So-
submit as a member.
All right, so there's the motion for voting or for voting. Click on your choice and submit.
We'll leave it open for a few more seconds to give.
All right, so while that's happening, can I continue on?
Yes, if you would like to.
All right, just for the sake of time.
Sure. All right, I'm going to close the vote. And Steve, would you like me to share the results?
Yes, let's go ahead.
All right.
All right, so we've got every 100% of the votes that were tabulated for that. So we will announce that that is the slate of candidates.
All right.
Okay, so to go in to start off, it's been 1 year since I've sat in this seat as being president of the board. And last September, when I addressed the organization in Rochester, I sort of put out some goals that I was setting forth for the year. In other words, that basically I felt that it was significant and important enough that this organization grow the overall membership. I wanted to do everything I could to improve the flow of information to the membership. Try to increase the number of members that are actively participating in the various programs and projects of the organization. And internally, I had made one to myself really to try and formalize our own internal processes. So that's what I had set forth for last year. So if I look at how we did, there has been a modest increase in the membership numbers. Every year you would have some that would be dropping off, some that would be adding in, but we are up modestly. We did set down and formalize our organizational structure. What most of the members need to know is that the board members voluntarily are handling all the administrative processes required to keep the organization functioning. So what we needed to do is to start to list and formalize that process a little bit and break down a series of tasks, and then take a look at what we needed to strengthen on, what change, what modifications we could do. So this past year, we have formalized that structure of committees. From a communication standpoint, there had been quite a lapse of having a steady, reliable flow of information out to the membership. And with Kim Mann and a couple other people working with her, we've gotten the Lifelines newsletter moving out every month, which fills in that void in between issues of the journal Wreck and Rescue. One of the early on issues, we faced was that we needed to transition, if you will, Wreck and Rescue. And so what we did do is solicit specifically and put together a team of people, and we have put together a new editorial and publications committee. Let me just get over to the next one here. So the first issue under the new publications committee is due out very, very shortly. So we will see some things in there. Continuing on, we were faced with a situation with our website. It was an older version of software not being maintained, or we were subject to having some hacking go on. So that website software has been changed over, and we have converted to a new software program that is going up online as we speak. All right, we've completed a life-saving service and Coast Guard bibliography. This was one of the things that has been out there and had been worked on before. A number of people have put together this thing, which gives a single point source to go find some additional reading or exploration, and that will ultimately be tagged onto the website also. The Surfman's roster, if you are not familiar with it, we have a number of people that have been doing research inside the National Archives, and we're putting together a complete roster from the station logbooks, if you will, of these stations. And we were going this past year at a much faster pace than we had in the last two. And then all of a sudden we got hit with COVID and the National Archives won't let us in. So I have numbers that will be coming out in the President's report in the next Rec and Rescue that's going to cover exactly where we are at this point, but we have made some significant movement on this. The whole idea is to have, be able to go to a particular station and we can pin every single person that was assigned to that station from the beginning up to the beginnings of World War II. The other thing that we did get heavily involved with, and that is providing life-saving service history expertise. We're involved with the planning group that's overseeing the design of the displays for the new or the future National Coast Guard Museum. And we have, it's my understanding, we have three of our folks that are members of this organization within that group. I take that back. We have 4 that I'm aware of. And there is mixed feelings with this, and I can tell you that based on what we understand, when that museum is done, it is going to be a very nice Coast Guard museum, but it will definitely not be a real deep dive into historical predecessor services. It's going to touch on a lot of different areas, but it isn't going to go into deep and accuracy to the degree a historian would really want to see. So that's leading us into a couple of things that we're planning for 2021. So I'm listing my goals anyway for the organization. I would like to see the growth in membership this year go up by at least 10%. With one of our committees, and that is the Marketing and Outreach Committee. We have just gotten another individual involved on that committee. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but ultimately what this group is going to be doing is putting together a database of all member or all museums and historic locations that do focus on life-saving service history or a significant event. In the upcoming Rec and Rescue, there is in my, as I say, in my report, and there will be some additional stuff coming out through Lifeline that I am asking our entire membership to, if they are aware of something or other, to fill out a very simple form that is already been created that will automatically build the database, give us the information that you find. Now, in this exercise, I'm looking to partner with all of these locations in some way that we can provide a single point source of information or become a clearinghouse back and forth. It should draw for our organization stuff that is going on with these partnering groups, and at the same time give us a means of putting out some of our expertise or acting as a clearinghouse or a helper to some of these other organizations. The next goal that I would really like that we focus on, and that is increase the number of members that are participating in our working committees. This past year, especially when we were looking at putting together a group for Rec and Rescue, very specifically, we were putting out a call to find out inside the organization skill sets that we have that we really weren't taking advantage of. And quite frankly, I can tell you that we had a bunch of people that popped out on this. We've got a very, very strong group now in that publications group, so that it's not all being shouldered by just one or two people. This marketing and outreach group, we just did another search, and we have another individual, a woman, I hope I pronounced her last name correctly, but it's Gail Carasy. She's from North Carolina. She's stepping into the role of leading on social media. She's an expert in beyond Facebook and Twitter and all that Instagram and stuff. And so she's going to be a real asset in my mind, and in Laura Charley, who is the chairman of that committee, take some of the load so that we don't need to go through the learning curve. We're bringing the learning curve to us. By having this virtual meeting that we took place this year, we're trying to look at what are we going to face next year. You know, I'm hoping that COVID is far behind us and we can be looking at getting back to the face-to-face and being able to physically see these locations where we go explore those life-saving service, early Coast Guard locations, meet some of the people, get a feel for the thing, and once again, touch base with each other. I mean, virtual is great. It's inexpensive, and it's we can handle a lot of people, but face-to-face is always great. But we're in the planning aspect of looking at doing potentially having to look at a virtual meeting next year to meet our requirements, or we're going to have a face-to-face. We're still working some of that stuff out. But as this event has gone, I think there is definite value, and we will try and perhaps have some additional virtual presentations throughout the year. So it's not like we only get together and we only can talk about this stuff, you know, once a year. The other key issue in my mind is to expand our exposure with the active duty Coast Guard. Now, you'd be surprised that a number of the active duty folks, they get a little bit of a history lesson when they're going through basic training, but that's about as far as it goes. And so where there is close proximity to Coast Guard assets and stations and a surfman's community, you start to see an interconnection because we're actually sharing their history. So there is a number of things that we're considering looking at and trying to partner up with some of these other agencies. So there'll be more coming on that, hopefully. So just trying to wrap this thing up, as according to my watch, I'm about 2 minutes out. We've set a lot of things that we would like to do. I have a lot of great projects that I'd like to be able to pursue. Some of those I mentioned in the President's report in Rec and Rescue, the President's note. But you saw some great photographs. We're putting together the Surfman's roster. We would love to be able to be building a database of identified photographs of these surfmans for ultimately merging some of this stuff together. We would also like to be putting together a definitive inventory of those items of equipment that are out there that we're aware of that should a presentation be desired or a display be desired by perhaps a partnering maritime museum, that we may be able to direct and support that. All of these things really depend upon the membership. And so to the Heritage Association members, I'm telling you, I got all sorts of great ideas. We've got committee heads that could be using some additional help. I will be putting out advertisements, if you will, when I can give you specifics, but I would like backups in each and every one of these committees, that we're not single sourcing all of our knowledge. And I would encourage also anybody that is so inclined to reach out to us on our website. So since we're pushed and I have it at almost 3 o'clock, Mallory, I don't know whether we have any time for me to take any questions. If not, I'm just going to ask that those people that do have some for me would either reach out to me directly or to go ahead and meet up with and post those or submit those to our website. So so I'm not being the one that runs over, I just want to thank, you know, the presenters that we had today for putting this together. I like the idea of having this opened up to people outside the organization to get a little bit of a feel, you know, for what we're really all about. And to Mallory, you specifically, and your organization for schooling us, if you will, and making me a firm believer in this. And again, anyone interested in finding out more about us, you can reach out to any one of the members or just throw your questions in to our website, which is us-savingservice.org. Okay, Mallory, you let me know whether that's it or whether we could take a question or two.
Yeah, I think we have a moment to take a question or two from the members. So we did have a question about the organization come in. What are the committees you have and need members to serve on those committees? So which?
All right, okay. Marketing and outreach is basically, there will be more definition coming out on that. What we need is, we've got people all over the country that are aware of things that we may not be aware of centrally. So that's a key one. From a financial standpoint, I would love to have somebody interested that could maybe help us a little bit. We're using QuickBooks and that sort of thing. Somebody that has some skill sets in that area would be greatly appreciated. The Surfman's roster. There are a number of us that are going around, but as you know, that these logbook records are located around the country. If we have members that are interested, we've got the best practices already laid out on how to go in, how to use the book, how to get the lists, and what we do with it. So there is a need there. From a membership standpoint, someone that could help out, you know, with some of the clerical things that go on with the organization. We've got a committee that is focusing on the historical or the structures. It's a combined group now that is keeping an eye on buildings, their status, whether they're on the verge of we're losing them, or perhaps there's preservation efforts going on. And at the same time, we've got the master database of all of the historic buildings all over the United States. So it's tying people in that can be helping from where they are on any news that's happening in those areas. Again, I have an individual that has been doing some collecting of some photographs, but once again, we need to have a central point where we've got copies of those that are identified. There is a number of us that have historic photographs, but we don't have a database, if you will, that is being preserved. From a IT standpoint, all of these things that we want, there is either programming involved or there is IT expertise. So we can use people that are interested in that stuff. There's a number of different areas. I could find a home for every single member involved in this organization, if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. That was all the questions that came in regarding the organization. To those questions that we did not get to, I will send those out to all of the presenters, and or you can email the organization, I think is the best way to, would you agree that's the best way to get some of those answered?
Yeah, I do, because they'll be channeled out. Anything that comes in on the website will be channeled out to the individual that can respond to that. And once again, believe me, I'm not shy about this. I'm always looking. You can see one of my number one goal is to increase the membership. We need to let the world know that there is all sorts of great individuals and a absolute wealth of historical knowledge based in this organization, and very, very few people know about it.
Excellent. Well, I think that is all that we have today. Again, apologies if we did not get to your question in the presentation. We'll try to follow up the best as we can afterwards, or you can reach out on your own and send another email. Steve, do you have any last or parting words before we leave?
No, just other than very quickly, again, thanks everybody. And any of the people, if you have some feedback to this, if you would like to see some additional presentations, we need your help in setting our direction on some of this stuff. I mean, we've got a limited number of players, so we really want to use their time and your time as best we can. So if you felt this was worthwhile, I think it was. And I would like to, as I say, present a little more of these historical snapshots, maybe one presentation a quarter, something or other along those lines, maybe an hour and an hour and a half presentation that we would open up to a large body of individuals. But feedback is what we would love to have.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to all of our attendees and our panelists today. As a representative for the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, it was a pleasure to be here today and to assist to help get this information out here. As the Great Lakes state, we have many life-saving stations that we care deeply about, and it was a pleasure to learn more about our colleagues on the East Coast today as well. So thank you all, and have a great afternoon.